الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So apologies for missing last week's weekly Q&A. What happened was we just became a little bit overwhelmed with the projects that were running and a little bit late on various different projects, and it took me a little bit of time to catch up. Our first question for this week. I heard our Iman will not be 100% perfect because of the ayah asking about light when we are on the Sirat. Could you elaborate about it? And the ayah in question, I believe what is being referred to is رَبَّنَا أَتْمِمْ لَنَا نُورَنَا, or our Lord, complete our light for us. Now I'm not completely sure that I recall specifically if this is related to our in terms of our Iman not being perfect in the dunya. However, the general concept that our Iman is deficient, there is no doubt whatsoever about this. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Istaqimu walan tuhsu." He says, stand firm upon the religion, be upright in the religion, but you will not be able to do so completely. You will not do it perfectly. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Saddidu wa qaribu." Do the right thing and come to near to it, as near as you can. So these are both evidences. I don't recall whether the ayah mentioned is an evidence, although I can see why it would be put forward as evidence. But in any case, there is no doubt that there are a multitude of evidences that suggest that we are not, as human beings, perfect. Our Iman goes up and our Iman goes down. It goes up when we obey Allah and it goes down when we disobey Allah. And which of us doesn't disobey Allah? All of us disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We regularly fall into sins, we regularly fall into disobedience, and we need to repent and turn back to Allah. So our Iman fluctuates between highs and lows. And from among the evidences for this is the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Inna al-iman la yakhlaqu fi jawfi ahadikum kama yakhlaqu ath-thawb, fas'alu Allah ta'ala an yujaddida al-iman fi qulubikum." That your Iman wears out like your clothing wears out. So ask Allah the Exalted to renew the Iman that is in your heart. It's a dua you can make. Allahumma jaddid al-iman fi qalbi. O Allah, renew the Iman in my heart. And likewise, from the evidences is the hadith of Hanzala al-Asadi radiyallahu an, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَوْ أَنَّكُمْ تَدُومُونَ عَلَى مَا تَكُونُونَ عِنْدِي وَفِي الذِّكْرِ لَصَافَحَتْكُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ إِلَى آخِرِ الْحَدِيثِ. He said that if you were to remain in the state that you were in when you were with me, the angels would shake your hands on the roads and in your beds. And then he said to him, وَلَكِنْ يَا حَنْظَلَ سَاعَةً وَسَاعَةً سَاعَةً وَسَاعَةً سَاعَةً وَسَاعَةً. There is a time for this and a time for that. There's a time for this and a time for that. A time for this and a time for that. أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So there is a multitude of evidences that our Iman goes up and down. And as for the ayah, رَبَّنَا أَتْمِمْ لَنَا نُورَنَا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا, I don't recall specifically, I'm trying to recall something specific about it, but there are many evidences for this, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Can a person recite other adhkar mentioned in the Sunnah for sujood, like Subuhun Quddus, Rabbul Malaikati wal Ruh, instead of or with Subhana Rabbiyal A'la? There is no doubt that reciting Subhana Rabbiyal A'la and Subhana Rabbiyal Azim is from the wajibat of the prayer, which means that you cannot leave it deliberately, and if you leave it deliberately, your prayer becomes invalid. However, you can add to it, because the Prophet ﷺ, he told us, for example, السجود فأكثروا فيه من الدعاء أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said that as for sujood, make a lot of dua in it. And he said, as for the ruku' فَعَظِّمُ فِيهِ الرَّبِّ, or kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said that venerate the Lord in the ruku'. So there is no harm in you joining together between this, even in your obligatory prayers. There is no harm, but you mustn't replace Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, because those are from the wajibat of the salah, the obligations of the prayer, that deliberately leaving them makes your prayer invalid. As for forgetting them by accident, you need to make sujood as-sahu. You need to make the prostration for forgetfulness. But the deliberate leaving off of the wajibat in the prayer, it leads to the prayer becoming invalid. So yes, you can add to it, and we don't see any difference in this between the obligatory prayer and the voluntary prayer. There is no real evidence to distinguish between those two being any different, the voluntary and the obligatory prayer, in terms of the dhikr that you are allowed to say, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Is there anything such as haram knowledge due to it acquired from a downloaded ebook? Is it sinful to benefit from haram knowledge? So there is such a thing as haram knowledge, no doubt, and there is such a thing as knowledge that doesn't benefit. So knowledge can be divided into two categories: ilmun yanfa'u wa ilmun la yanfa'. Knowledge that benefits and knowledge that doesn't benefit. From the knowledge that doesn't benefit, we can divide it into two categories also. Knowledge which is mubah illa annahu la yanfa'. It's permissible, but it doesn't benefit people. It doesn't bring you anything in the deen or the dunya. It's a knowledge, but it doesn't bring you any benefit that is going to make you close to Allah, nor is it haram. And then there is ilmun muharram. There is haram knowledge which Allah Azza wa Jal has forbidden a person from, and that knowledge which is forbidden. So we said that forbidden knowledge comes broadly in the category of knowledge that doesn't benefit people. Ilmun la yanfa'. It doesn't benefit the people. And from the evidences of this is the hadith, the dua in which the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa min qalbin la yakhsha wa min du'a'in la yusma' wa min nafsin la tashba' aw kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That I seek refuge with you, O Allah, from knowledge that doesn't benefit, and from a heart that doesn't have khushu', and from and from a dua which is not answered, and from a soul which is never satisfied. So this is from the evidence. As for what relates to downloading books, then we believe that the concept of copyright is a valid and acceptable concept in the religion of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. Muslims have to stick to the conditions they agree to. And the Prophet ﷺ, the only exception he made is a condition which is not in the book of Allah. Illa shartan laysa fi kitabillah. Except for a condition that is not in accordance with the book of Allah. As for the concept of copyright, that an author has worked hard, given their time and their money to write a book, and they don't give permission for everybody to just copy that book, then we don't see anything in Islam that would make that invalid or that would make that a haram condition. Rather, we see that that condition is acceptable for people to make, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Therefore, if a person was to break that condition and to distribute a book or download a book without the permission of the author, then in most cases, I don't say every case because there might be some cases, like for example, that need research, like what happens if you bought a physical copy of the book? Can you download an electronic copy of the book? But generally, I personally, I don't see that copyright, I don't see the problem Islamically, or the contradiction with Islamic law and the concept of the author reserving rights to a book. And I think that the argument that knowledge can't be copyrighted, that this is an argument that is extremely weak. I mean, it has no basis whatsoever, because it's not knowledge you're copyrighting. You're not copywriting ayat of the Quran or hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. You're copywriting a person's efforts to summarize, to present something, to gather together information. That is the effort of the person. It's not, you're not copywriting the knowledge. You can go get that knowledge yourself, but you'll have to work hard for it. So as for benefiting from someone else's work, then it has to be with their permission. If you acquire knowledge though, from a book that you downloaded, is that knowledge haram? If we say that you downloaded a book that was haram, or you stole a book, for example. You stole a book from a bookshop. La qadar Allahu dhalik. May Allah not make that happen. You stole a book from a bookshop. If you steal a book from a bookshop and then read it, is the knowledge contained within it haram? No doubt, you're reading it or you're benefiting from it. It's not, stealing it was haram and benefiting from it was haram. But does that make the knowledge that you gained from it invalid? I'm not sure that it makes the knowledge you gained from it invalid. The knowledge itself is still valid. It's either authentic or not. It's either correct or not. But no doubt a person should stick to the conditions that they have agreed to, and they should stick to the laws and the regulations that don't contradict the religion of Islam. So it's important for a person, if you, I do think there's research. And for example, I would sometimes, if I had purchased a book, then I might, for example, have a PDF copy of the book that I have purchased, for example, in order to make it easy to refer to it on the device. So this may be, needs some research. If this does this, and is it allowed for the author to say, you can purchase this book, but I forbid you to take a picture of it on your iPad for your personal use. There may be, even in copyright, that needs some thought to it. But the idea of just downloading books for free when the author is expecting people to pay for them, I don't think this is correct Islamically. So a person should be careful of that, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So the question here is about donating charity on a regular basis. Someone would like to donate regularly and consistently every day. However, this is impractical. Will I get the same reward if I were to donate monthly instead, with donating the same amount? For example, instead of £1 a day, £30 a month. Additionally, is there a difference between money transferred automatically or me transferring it each time? And they're thinking about the hadith where a small good deed done consistently is better for you than a large deed done infrequently or inconsistently. I think the key word is inconsistently. So there is no harm in a deed that is done monthly. There is no harm in a deed that is done yearly. But the consistency is what matters. However, there is no doubt doing something every day, from the hadith of the hadith regarding Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned a number of good deeds and said, for example, which among you have visited a sick person today, which of you among you have followed a janazah today, and so on. And Abu Bakr said, me, me, me. So there is a value to doing something every day. But if it's difficult for you to do every day, do it every month, do it every week. I don't see the issue of it being automatic versus you clicking it yourself. As long as you have the intention for that charity to be continuous, I don't see that you have to click on it every time for it to be rewarded. It's enough for you to make a single intention for that continuous charity and to give instructions for it to be taken out of your wealth. For example, to your bank or whatever, you give instructions for it to be taken every single month. I don't see, inshallah, any harm in that, inshallah ta'ala. And no doubt there's a value to doing something every day, but if you struggle to do it every day and it becomes overly burdensome for you, you have to remember that sometimes doing something every day might be the reason why you stop doing it. We talked about the deeds adwamuha, the regular, consistent deeds. But sometimes doing something too often leads to a lack of consistency, because what happens is you do it every single day and it becomes burdensome, then you stop doing it. Whereas doing it once a week or doing it once a month might be more achievable, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. We know as Muslims, when we hear the name of the Prophet Muhammad, we say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. No doubt we strive to send as much salawat on him as we can, but is this only when we hear the actual name, or when someone mentions the Prophet or the Messenger of Allah and so on? Notice for all the times that the Prophet is mentioned, whether he's mentioned by name, Muhammad, or whether he's mentioned by the Prophet, or whether he's mentioned by the Messenger or the Messenger of Allah, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the evidences for this is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Indeed, Allah and His angels exalt the mention, or Allah exalts the mention of the Prophet. He didn't say Muhammad, he said the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the angels ask him to do so. O you who believe, exalt the mention of the Prophet, or ask Allah to exalt the mention of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and send your salam upon him. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant him peace. So here, what we see is that Allah Azza wa Jal talks about the Nabi, and then Allah Azza wa Jal says to the Muslims, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi. Make this dua for him, and it doesn't mention for Muhammad or for the Prophet or for the Messenger, but for however he is referred to. Even if I say about him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, even if I just use a pronoun, I can still say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And I also don't need necessarily to always have mentioned his name, like in the sense that it's not just the name that is a trigger for the salat and the salam. Rather, from the Prophet ﷺ mentioned sending salat and salam upon him on the day of Jumu'ah, for example. And the best way that a person can send salat and salam upon the Prophet ﷺ, as far as I'm aware, is to say the salat Ibrahimiyya. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. So this is something you can even do in of itself. For example, doing it a lot on a Friday. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. I would like to know your opinion. May Allah Azza wa Jalla bless the questioner. The question is asking about two people, and I don't really particularly want to mention the names here, because I'm not sure it's going to bring any benefit, and the reason for that is that it's only likely to further sort of polarize and make people sort of kind of, what's the word, go to one thing or the other, or whatever it might be. But the question itself is very valid. What do you do when you're trying to seek knowledge from Salafi students of knowledge, but they are refuting one another? This in itself is a topic that requires some detail and some time to answer. And I'm not going to answer it in complete detail. But I would advise this person who asked this question, may Allah bless you, you sound like a very sincere person. You sound like someone who really wants the truth. My advice is go to the mashayikh and listen to the scholars of Islam talk about the etiquettes of differing. As an example, look at what Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala said about the etiquettes of differing among the students of knowledge. Don't just look at one of the mashayikh in this, like that you just take and because you might take a particular sheikh in this and you get a particular opinion, an ijtihadi opinion, that is the opinion of the sheikh, and you don't get to know about the broader opinion of the shuyukh on this issue, the scholars on this issue. But I would honestly advise you, go and ask, go and sit with the mashayikh and ask. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a totally different narrative to the narrative that is put out by many of the students of knowledge in our time. there is a narrative put out by many of the British and American and so on, Western students of knowledge, that wallahi, to be honest, whenever it's presented to our mashayikh, they basically tell you, be quiet, sit down, open your book and get on with something beneficial. And the amount of times I've seen people, literally slapped down because of this. The sheikh, well-known mashayikh from our big major mashayikh, they tell them, listen, you need to just be quiet and sit down. And you need to stop causing these issues between one another, and you need to do, and so on. And so I think that if you look at this issue in reality, you actually go back to the mashayikh and back to the ulama, really, to be honest, inshallah, the truth will become clear to someone who wants to know what that truth is. As for the person who is mu'anid, stubborn, and doesn't want to know the truth, that person, there's nothing I can do for them. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But the truth is absolutely crystal clear for anyone who has مَنْ كَانَ لَهُ قَلْبٌ أَوْ أَلْقَى السَّمْعَ وَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ. Anyone who has a heart, anyone who listens with their ear, they will realize exactly what the madhab of the Salaf is in this regard. And they will realize that so much of the qila wa qala that went on among the tullab al-ilm in the West didn't have any knowledge behind it. It didn't have any knowledge behind it, and it didn't have any basis for it. And it didn't have any knowledge behind it in terms of, serious sort of understanding and study of the issues and what have you. And I'm not saying that for everything, because there are times when people need to speak out about certain things, no doubt. But a lot of the time, a lot of this was really just wasting time, and it wasn't sincere. And that's not me accusing any one particular brother. That's why I'm not mentioning names, because I don't want to mention a name and someone says, oh, Muhammad Tim accused Fulan. I'm not accusing any particular person. I'm saying the general trend among the tullab in the West of, busying themselves, refuting their brothers in Salafiyah. This is, in my opinion, a giant waste of time. A giant waste of time. And I would say to those brothers, if you want to challenge me on that, let us go and sit. For example, I'm happy anytime. We'll go to Sheikh Fawzan, we'll go and sit with Sheikh Fawzan. And I promise you, Sheikh Fawzan will not even give you 10 seconds before he tells you, be quiet, sit down, and get your book out and study. And I've personally seen this from so many of the mashayikh. Sheikh after sheikh after sheikh. Time after time. From mashayikh from every corner of the Mamlaka in Saudi, outside of Saudi, they said, Akhwan, this is not your job. This is not what we taught you for. This is not your concern. There are issues. And I'm not going to say there are not issues among people that need to be spoken about. I have no issue with that. But spoken about with the right etiquette, with the right knowledge, at the right time, with the right guidance, that's a different matter. But no doubt, this is, I think, if a person really sincerely goes and looks at the truth in this issue, Allah, to be honest with you, they will see it without a shadow of a doubt. They will see what the truth is without a shadow of a doubt. At the same time, when two people differ with one another, what's our position generally from the position of Islam generally? Two people of knowledge, let's not say about, mashayikh or ulama, whatever, tullab ilm. Two people of knowledge differ with one another and they disagree, and one of them accuses the other. If we go back to the qawa'id of al-jarh wa-ta'deel, the principles of criticizing and praising narrators of hadith, and I'm not going to say that jarh wa-ta'deel is wider applied than the science of hadith, but that's a different issue. But just generally, if we go back, we see that, generally speaking, you can't prefer one person all of the time over the other. What you have to do is you have to look at the qara'in, you have to look at the evidences for what one person says and what the other person says. And you have to go back and really see, is it genuine or not? because there's a mas'ala in Masail al-Jarh wa-Ta'dil, which is sometimes called Mas'alatul Aqran, the issue of people who are contemporaries. And often personal things happen between people. Personal things happen between people, right? Personal issues. Things that, even between our mashayikh, personal issues happen sometimes. Things happen, arguments, misunderstandings, whatever. Ultimately, those things are not to be taken into account until you've understood that there is real substance behind it. So here, for example, somebody says that someone lied about the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, show me what he said in context, and let me listen to what this person said. He said, I didn't lie. The hadith, in my opinion, is authentic, for example. Or he said that I misspoke, and I meant to say it was an athar of Umar, for example, but I said it was a hadith, and it wasn't, it was a I simply said it wrong, or I memorized it wrong, for example, or a person quoted a hadith and they quoted a particular wording of that hadith, and the scholars maybe differed over whether it's authentic or not. But you have to go back and see the reality of something. And then you have to distinguish also between a person who makes a mistake and a person whose methodology is corrupt. There's a big difference between the two. Shatibi mentioned this and others. Shatibi, if I'm not mistaken, he mentioned it in I'tisam, if I'm not mistaken, rahimahullah ta'ala, that you have issues, that you have times when a scholar or a student of knowledge, for example, makes a mistake. Well, I make mistakes all the time. But I would hope that those mistakes are not indicative of a corrupt methodology, not indicative of an evil, an attachment to bid'ah or innovation or something like that, but simply indicative of making a mistake. If this happens, if we want to remove the students of knowledge who make mistakes, we'll not be left with any. And if we want to remove the mashayikh who make mistakes, wallahi la yabqa ahad, there will not be anybody left who doesn't make a mistake. Because making mistakes is a fundamental nature of human beings. We all make mistakes. But there is a difference between the person who makes a mistake and the person whose methodology is corrupt, whose methodology is evil and corrupt. And so this is a matter to be taken into account. Me personally, as you know, I try to avoid unnecessarily wasting my time with things that I can't add any benefit to the discussion. I think that there's a lot of work to be done in da'wah. And right now, the da'wah to the Quran and the Sunnah is very, very weak, subhanAllah. And the amount of people, even from people we were studying with in the Islamic University of Medina, who have come out and said all kinds of strange things, have gone astray and have led the other people astray. Allah, we don't have time. We don't have time for, petty qila wa qal. He said and she said among tulab al-ilm. We don't have time for this. So me, myself, I try not to busy myself with it as much as possible. That's what I heard my mashayikh advise me. That's what I heard from our shuyukh. I can't say I heard it from every sheikh. From the sheikhs that I sat with, that's the advice that they gave me. May Allah Azza wa Jal preserve them, may Allah Azza wa Jal protect them. That's what they told us. They said, La tanshaghilu bihadha. Don't busy yourself with this. Rather, there is a time for it. But don't make it your shughul al-shaghil, the thing that keeps you going all day and all night. Rather, the issues of al-tabdi', al-hadar min al-mubtadi', for example, warning from the innovator, these are important in Islam. But don't make this shughul al-shaghil, the thing that makes you busy all day and all night. You don't have anything else except this. Because wallahi, this situation we are in right now is critical. We are in a situation, wallahi, as far as it relates to following the Sunnah, which is critical. The immat al-mudallin are appearing from every corner, the leaders of misguidance. The sects, the deviant groups are pulling our kids away left, right and centre. We don't have time for sniping at each other from the rooftops. So for me personally, I'm happy to recommend who I recommend. When I recommend somebody, I'm not saying that I know what's in their heart. I recommend them because I personally see from them what has made me personally happy, has made me admire them, has made me respect them. And I don't claim they've never made a mistake, and I don't speak about all their past videos or past opinions and whether this was correct or that was correct. I don't think that a person has, if someone did that for me, I don't think they would have anything good to say about it. You know, if a person was to go through all my videos and pull out every mistake, what good would they have to say about it? And I also try not to busy myself with what other people think. I mean, I care a lot about what my mashayikh think if they are giving me advice about what I might be doing wrong. I care a lot about the sincere students who give me advice and try to implement whatever they said. And even some of the brothers who wrote some things about me that was not, you know, it was quite critical. Wallah, I read it and I took it on board and I listened to it and I did my best to see whatever I could see to correct it. You know, I became Muslim at the age of 14 years old. And for a long time, it's pretty much the only revert that I knew in Newcastle at that time, maybe for 3 or 4 years. And since then, honestly, I can genuinely tell you, I honestly couldn't care less about what people think. About comments, about what people write, what they like, what they don't like. If Allah is pleased with me, that's enough for me. And I don't know that Allah is pleased with me, so that's enough for me to worry about. And honestly, everyone else, and whatever good I can do, alhamdulillah. And whatever I did that isn't good, ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive me for it and ask Allah to correct me. And I'm willing to listen to sincere advice. I'm always willing to listen to sincere advice. And I'm happy to recommend people that I know, people that I worked with, people that I have a lot of love and respect for. I have no problem recommending those people. And I don't feel shy to recommend them. And the fact that someone else doesn't recommend them, I mean, it's a matter of ijtihad. They're allowed to have their opinion and I'm allowed to have my opinion. And there's no evidence to say that theirs is right over mine, except if you study what is said and then you evaluate it. That's the best I can say about that. I don't know if I helped or if I made it worse, but that's the best that I can say. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So this question is asking, relating to issues of intimacy and issues of sort of excessive noise and things like that, like people hearing you, and what can, you know, what is this something we should be concerned about, so on and so forth. And there is no doubt that matters, you know, private matters relating to intimacy should always be kept private between husband and wife, and that should never extend to, in any way, either by a person exposing what happens in private, or by a person, you know, being not being careful about covering their aura, or, you know, closing their, you know, windows and doors and what have you. In terms of people hearing, I think that a person has to take, you know, reasonable precautions. At the end of the day, concealing these matters is very important in Islam. And I don't think that it's the case that houses are so close these days and that it's any different. I think it was probably worse in the time, in the early days, when people had houses that were not made of solid bricks and thick glass and so on. They had houses made of clay, made of mud, made of straw. So ultimately, I think that a person just has to be sensible about this, just a common sense approach. You know, at the end of the day, as it relates to intimacy, this must always be completely private. And make sure a person makes sure that they, you know, close their doors and windows and what have you, and they make sure to keep the noise down at the end of the day. And that's basically what they must do. This issue of haya, of shyness, and of, you know, concealing private matters and intimate matters and personal matters, very, very important in the religion of Islam. It's a very, very important part of Islam. So I think that a person, if they use common sense and they, guard their privacy well, I don't see there being, I haven't come across a place in the places I've travelled to where I could imagine this being a problem. But the problem is that what we see from a lot of people is either people are careless about matters about personal matters. So men discuss it with their friends, women discuss it with their friends or relatives, or perhaps people are careless about their own privacy, locking the doors and closing windows and what have you. People might be careless about their privacy. But I think if people are careful about their privacy and keep their private matters private, I don't see why there should be any concern, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. And I think part of that is to do with haya. It's to do with haya. Haya is, and even the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah awla an yustahiya min." Allah is the most deserving to have haya from him. So a person, even in these situations, has to have modesty in terms of the way they behave, in terms of the sort of way they carry about, or they carry out various, or the way that they sort of carry themselves and the way they behave. A person has to have haya. Even in matters of intimacy, a person has to have modesty and shyness and so on. And I think that if a person has that modesty and shyness and is careful about their privacy, then there will not be a concern with this, inshallah. If we are in prayer and we find a distraction, such as children or pets playing, can we make a signal or clap our thigh or click to alert them to stop? We'll come back to that question, inshallah ta'ala. You need some tafseel, description of what you can and can't do in the salah. Gesturing in the salah is something that is possible, to make a gesture in the salah. But we'll come back to that question and answer it in a bit more detail, inshallah. When reading the Quran during salah, if we come across an ayah which has one of the du'as in the Quran, like رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً, can we read it with the intention of making that du'a? Or is it only the intention of reading the Quran? No, I think it's reading the Quran. And I think the du'a, usually it's part of a sentence. For example, this du'a, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ وَمِنْهُمْ مَن يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً. So it's a sentence about what people say. There might be some ayat that are said like a du'a, where the ayah itself is said like a du'a, but in context it's saying people say, those who say. So I don't think you can really make that into a du'a as such, but you can repeat it as a du'a in your sujood, and Allah knows best. Person asks about a husband who commits zina and says he has repented, and then his wife takes him back and he continues to do so. Is it permissible for her to ask for separation? I think first of all, whenever you have a story or a question about something happening between husband and wife, you have to hear from both sides. I can't give you an answer on a video that I can say this answer is for you, because if I haven't heard from the husband, who might say I never did such a thing, for example, but if it is the case that the husband has fallen into zina and this seems to be something that he has repented from but he has gone back into again, then a woman has every right to separation. Rather, you would say that it's not permissible for her even to remain in that marriage if that's the situation, and if the husband is not going to change or is not able to change at this moment in time. I don't think it's permissible for her to remain in that marriage under those circumstances. But that can't be taken as an individual answer for the person, because ultimately it has to be, the situation has to be looked at by someone on a more personal level, whereby you have somebody talk to the husband and ask him about what happened and so on. But if it's the case that this has happened and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best, then for sure a woman should not stay with her husband while this is his condition, and Allah knows best. When the Prophet ﷺ went on a night journey and led the other prophets in prayer, would this classify the other prophets as companions of the Prophet ﷺ? No, I don't believe so. I haven't come across an opinion in that regard. I haven't come across any of the scholars who said that. Rather, they are prophets. They are above the level of companions. They are at a higher level, so they are prophets. And so it doesn't. They don't take that secondary, that secondary status after the status of the prophets and the messengers, because they are prophets, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Also, I'm not sure that fulfills the conditions of being a companion. من لقي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في حياته مؤمنا به ومات على الإيمان. Whoever met the Prophets during their life, believing in them and died upon Iman. It's not clear that when the Prophets prayed behind the Prophet does that fulfill those conditions. But in any case, they are Prophets, not companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is it okay to pray tahajjud every night? And is it okay to say astaghfirullah after every prayer, not just the Fard prayer? I don't have any evidence for saying astaghfirullah after every prayer. What I know of is evidence for saying it after the Fard prayer. Astaghfirullah, 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 Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam, tabarakta ya dhal jalali wa ikram. As for tahajjud every night, yes, that's absolutely fine, and that was the habit of the Prophet ﷺ, and I mentioned in some of the courses that Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, he said, من يقم الحول فقد من يقم الحول يصب ليلة القدر أو كما قال. He said that whoever stands every night of the year in prayer will certainly have caught Laylatul Qadr, and Allah knows best. I heard that memorizing the Quran is difficult for women. I'm a housewife in my 30s who started memorizing about 4 years back. I made good progress as I was following the wrong methodology and I was just on my own without a proper teacher in class. Now I join the centre twice a week. I'm still experimenting. However, I could only memorize 8 juz in this long span. I'm forgetting a lot. It's draining my energy, and I started doubting my decision of hifz. Now I listen that it's not recommended for women unless they're very intelligent. I'm depressed. I don't want to step back, but I'm not making good progress. Please advise. I do not know where this idea comes from that women shouldn't memorize the Quran, or that it's harder for women. I don't know of any evidence for this. This requires, perhaps I haven't come across it, but I can't see any evidence that would indicate that. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ. Women are the full sisters of men. Women are the same as men in everything except where there is a specific difference given. Why can a woman not memorize the Quran? Why can a woman not become a scholar? Why can't she memorize hadith? There were many great women scholars of the past, and some of the great scholars of the Quran, even of recent times, were women. I don't see any reason at all why it should be said that Quran memorization is difficult for women. Quran memorization, generally, keeping the Quran memorized is difficult. Maybe memorizing in the first stages is not so difficult. Allah made the Quran easy to commit to memory. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We made the Quran easy to remember. So is there anyone who will remember? But keeping the Quran in memory is difficult. It requires effort and hard work. And that's why Allah put a special status for the people who memorize the Quran and act upon their memorization. For example, that it will be said to them Yawm al-Qiyamah that rise, it will be said to them read, recite, and rise up as you used to recite in the dunya. Warattil, and you recite the Quran and rise up. and وَرَتِّلْ كَمَا كُنْتَ تُرَتِّلُ فِي الدُّنْيا, and rise up like you used to recite, and recite the Quran like you used to recite in this dunya. For your place will be the akhir ayati, the last ayah that you recite. This kind of status that is given is only given for hard work. أَلَا إِنَّ سِلْعَةَ اللَّهِ غَالِيَةٌ أَلَا إِنَّ سِلْعَةَ اللَّهِ الْجَنَّةِ. That what Allah is giving you is expensive. It's paradise. Paradise is expensive. So don't regret your decision. I think 8 juz in 4 years is fantastic. I don't see that's anything to be ashamed about or embarrassed about. 8 juz in 4 years is amazing. Inshallah. I know people who did the whole Quran in a year. I know people who did the whole Quran in 2 years. I know people who did the whole Quran in 10. So I don't see that 8 juz in 4 years is anything to worry about. But I do think you have to have the right methodology. And I'm not sure if I'm the right person to speak to you about that. Maybe my memorization is not as strong as I would like it to be, generally speaking. And I'm trying to work to just really improve the quality of my memorization, whether it be Quran, whether it be Hadith, whether it be poetry or statements of the scholars, to really, I feel like it's not as strong as it could be. However, what I would recommend, what I do think is really important, is divide your Quran into 3 categories. The hifz, which is, and it's not the only way, but I'm just going to give you what I've benefited personally. The hifz, which is qadim, the memorization which is old, and you are firm in it. You're firm in it. So let's say a person started memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, and it took them 6 months. For example, the first part, the first juz maybe, they're really strong on it. They can, recite it even in their sleep. They can recite it without making a mistake. That's in one category. The next category is the hifz that is, we can call it shibh jadid. It's almost new. You've memorized it and you've read it correctly from memory, but it's not as firm. And the third category is the hifz, which is new, brand new. You're doing it right now. I think you give more attention to the middle category than anything else, because that is the one that you are at risk of losing. As for the new hifz, that's not so bad. That's not so bad. And the old stuff that is solid, you can inshallah, just make it part of your regular reading of the Quran. So if a person separates between reading the Quran and memorizing the Quran, they read a wird from the Quran every day. A juz, half a juz, 2 juz, 3 juz, whatever it is, they read a portion of the Quran every day. The old memorization, just reading that portion every day is enough to keep it in your memory. As for the hifz, which is shibh jadid, it's almost new and it's shaky, it's not sufficient to read it once a month or whatever. You have to read it every day until it becomes like the old hifz, that you can just maintain it. And then the new hifz as well, you need to understand that there are 2 types of memorization: true memorization and false memorization. Most people, what they do is false memorization. And I would include myself in that a lot of the time. When I was memorizing, I was doing a lot of false memorization, which is you memorize until it sticks in your head once and then you move on. In other words, give you a new ayah, you memorize it 5, 6, 7 times, it's in your head, yeah, go. That's not real memorization. Real memorization might take 40 times, 60 times, 100 times until it is ingrained in your memory. It's never going to go. Or it will take a long time before it goes. So the harder you ingrain it in your memory in the beginning, the less time, the longer it will take to fade as well. And also the idea of hifz, which is almost new, is important, because your hifz, to put something in long-term memory, you have to forget it and remember it again. You have to kind of lose it and get it back again. That's what makes long-term memories. something, it's in your memory, then it sort of goes out, then it goes, you put it back in again. So it's that kind of intermittent revision that makes long-term memories, that makes your hifz really strong. So why is that first juz of Surah Al-Baqarah really strong? Or the last juz of the Quran, why is it really strong? Because you've repeated it so many times and learnt it and memorized it again so many times that it's carved into your memory. So don't let your new hifz go until it's become old hifz, until it's become really, really strong. There are lots and lots of ways, and like I said, there are much better people than me to talk about this. But just that's what I benefited personally. I have gone through the process of memorizing the Quran, forgetting, or sorry, I should not say forgetting, but being caused to forget part of it, and then memorizing, and then being caused to forget, and then realizing that that's not the way. It's not the way. You need to, it's better for you to go slowly and really commit it to memory than to go quickly and just, it's just like pouring sand into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. As much as you're pouring in is falling out of the bottom again. So you need to have a regular amount of the Quran you read every day. That is to protect your old hifz. And whenever you start a new hifz, go through your nearly new hifz as well. So that might be, for example, let's just say that I'm memorizing the first page of Surah Al Imran, for example. Obviously, the last few pages of Surah Al-Baqarah are going to be nearly new hifz. They're not going to be like rock solid. So every time before I start that page, I'm going to go back. Maybe once a day, maybe every other day, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read all of that nearly new hifz, the nearly new, until I get back to my new page and I confirm that I know it. Again, give it another day, go back again, go all the way through again till I know it, and again, and so on. And then obviously for the old hifz, it's not guaranteed it will never go, because it can go, but it requires less maintenance. It requires less maintenance. The one that requires the most time and maintenance and effort is the nearly new hifz. The stuff you memorized this week or 2 weeks, within the last 2 weeks, or within the last month, this requires the most effort to keep in your mind. It requires a lot of energy and a lot of time, but it's worth it. Don't ever regret your decision. It's totally wrong. Don't ever let anybody say that women can't memorize the Quran, or Allah doesn't make the Quran, memorizing the Quran for women. Some of the greatest scholars of this ummah were among the women. Like our mother Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardaha, and our mother Salama radiallahu anha, among the great scholars of Islam. Don't ever, let people put you down like that. Rather, you just keep memorizing the Quran, go at your own pace. It's not a race. Like I sometimes say, I'll be honest, I sit with great memorizers, people who I know personally who are amazing at memorization. They just memorize everything. And they're like, yeah, I memorized 500 lines of poetry yesterday, I memorized, 200 hadith or something like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, maybe 1 hadith, 2 hadith. And ultimately you can't. If you spend your life, you can be inspired by that person. But if you spend your life trying to be that person, or beating yourself up that why did I not, I'm going to memorize 200 hadith today, and you sit there and sit there and sit there, and before long you've forgotten because you don't have that capacity. So you just keep going slowly, and inshallah you'll get there. Man jadda wajad. Whoever makes an effort will eventually reach their goal. Don't slow down, don't worry, don't give up. Just keep going step by step. And every time, step by step, you will reach your goal, inshallah ta'ala. And you will become like that person who can memorize all of those lines in one day. You'll become like them. But it's just you're not right there, right at this minute in time, at this moment in time. So just go at your own pace, but just keep on going and be consistent, inshallah. And that advice is advice to me before it's advice to you. And I'm advising myself before I'm advising you, and Allah knows best. Do women need to complete the missed days of Ramadan before the 6 days of Shawwal, or can they catch up Ramadan fast in later months? If we take the opinion that the 6 days are inside of Shawwal, Ramadan fast should be completed first. But as for those who take the opinion that 6 days of Shawwal means ibtida'an min Shawwal, starting from the month of Shawwal onwards, you do the Ramadan fast first and then you try to complete 6 days after that, inshallah. If you backbite and ask for Allah's forgiveness, do you get your good deeds back, or are they taken away from you permanently? So backbiting is a sin that involves the right of Allah and the right of another person. So the right of Allah is you ask Allah's forgiveness, and inshallah Allah will forgive you. The issue is there's still the right of that person you did backbiting of. So that person, you need to ask forgiveness from that person. And if you can't ask forgiveness because you think it's going to make the situation worse, or you can't reach them, then make dua for them and mention them with good until you think that you've made up for the backbiting that you did. But you can't get your deeds back just from the forgiveness of Allah, because it's not just a matter. It's not just a matter which is a right of Allah. It's a matter which is a right of Allah and the right of another person as well. So the other person is the problem. Allah Azza wa Jal is most forgiving, most merciful. He will forgive. But the issue is the other person might not be so, or will not be, for sure, will not be so forgiving. So you really need to either to ask them to forgive you, or either, if you cannot do that because you think if I ask them it's going to make it worse or whatever, then at least make dua for them until you feel that you have made up for what you said about them, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Then, inshallah ta'ala, the good deeds can come back to you or not be taken away from you, inshallah ta'ala. And there's no doubt that Allah Azza wa Jal can inspire a person to forgive another person. And Allah can inspire the person that you committed backbiting to, or you did backbiting to them. Allah Azza wa Jal can inspire them to forgive you, but that's only when you show that sincerity by asking Allah's forgiveness and by asking that person for their forgiveness or making dua for them until you feel that you've made up for what you did, and mentioning them with good. It's a very good question. It's a little bit complicated. I'm going to have to try and maybe go back to that one, inshallah. And that one as well. I'm looking to homeschool my children, inshallah, and I'm concerned about the lack of Islamic material on natural sciences. I don't want them to learn about evolution, but I want them to know that Allah has made the creation as a sign for us and we shouldn't be afraid of investigating. Do you know any good resources, schools or universities that have research and books on science from a creationist perspective? Can we use some of the Christian resources? Can Al-Madrasatul Umariyya provide some course on how to teach the natural science? Perhaps some nasiha. And can you provide some links and suggestions? It's a very, very good question. May Allah bless you. Maybe the links and things I would have to do later on or by email or something. But for now, I do think that I can mention a couple of things. I think there is no harm in a person benefiting from the Christian resources on this topic because they are probably one of the very few groups who have extensive materials from a creationist perspective. At the same time, I would not just print them out and give them to the child. I would review them as a parent to see if there are any references to Christian beliefs or un-Islamic beliefs that could be taken out of there. I also think that in order for your child to pass an exam, they are going to need to know about evolution. My nasiha on this is that you are open and you tackle this topic as an aqidah topic in Islam. So before we study evolution in biology, we study evolution from an Islamic perspective. First of all, in the Quran, what did Allah Azza wa Jal say about the creation of mankind? Second of all, the evidences within Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam directly and that Adam did not evolve, and prove why it's not possible to be true in Islam. Because Allah is able to do all things. Inna Allaha ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah is able to do all things. So it would not be difficult for Allah to create Adam from an ape. But He didn't. Because He said He didn't. And that's what the child needs to come out with. That the issue of evolution, and what a lot of people, maybe what's not presented clearly to people, this is not an issue of Allah being able to do something. Evolution would be a great proof for the existence of Allah if it were true, which it's not. And I'll tell you why it's a great proof for the existence of Allah if it were true, and it isn't true. But if it were true, from the point of argument, evolution indicates knowledge of the future. Because the changes that are made are not beneficial until millions of years later on. So let me give you an example. Here we have, let's say, a fish. And this fish is going to grow legs and run around on land, which is incredibly beneficial to that fish 10 million years later. But when it grew a little tiny stump on the side of its body, which it didn't, but just for the sake of argument, it grew a tiny stump. What benefit was that tiny stump to that fish? For 10 million years, nothing did that fish benefit from it. Therefore, this is an indication of knowledge of the future. Therefore, if evolution were true, it would be an evidence for the existence of God, not an evidence against the existence of God. That's one point from one side of the argument. And from one point to look at, that evolution itself, it's not an issue of Allah, whether Allah is able to do this or not. The issue is an issue of Iman, that Allah told us that He didn't do it. So now who do you believe? Charles Darwin or Allah? You choose. That's what it is. The Quran told us, Allah Azza wa Jal told us clearly and explicitly in multiple ayat of the Quran that He created Adam directly without any intermediary. Charles Darwin said he didn't. Who do you believe? Allah or Charles Darwin? You've got to choose who your God is. You've got to choose who you worship. You worship Allah, you worship Charles. You've got to choose. It's that simple. So it's an Aqeedah issue. It's an issue of belief. It's not an issue of science. Scientifically then the issue comes, well, what about all this wealth of evidence? And here is where there are certain books that I would recommend. I'm not sure if I would recommend, I'm not going to recommend any books by non-Muslims, even though there are some great books by non-Muslims on this topic. But there is a really, really nice book by Dr. Asghar Rashid. There's a book called The Message of the Messengers. And in this book, it's like a pamphlet size, not very big. The author, Allah bless her, she goes through, a lot of very, very strong evidences and topics, just in simple language and in a simple way, to show you some of the flaws in this concept or this theory of evolution. I've given a lecture on the topic. I think it's probably online. I've given multiple lectures on the topic, where we just established, look, if Allah told us that He created Adam directly, that's it. Sami'na wa ata'na, we hear, we obey, that's it. We believe, that's it. And evolution is just as much of a belief as my belief that Allah Azza wa Jal created Adam directly. And that is because it is not an evidence-based theory. It's not an evidence-based theory. It's a theory that is based upon ideas and conjecture and Iman. Not good Iman, but just Iman. And that's why when you actually push evolutionists and say to them that I want you to prove to me, because science is about observation and repetition. You're telling me something you've never observed. مَا أَشْهَدْتُهُمْ خَلْقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَا خَلْقَ أَنفُسِهِمْ. I never made them witness the creation of the heavens and the earth, and I never made them witness the creation of their own selves. So you haven't observed it. Okay, can you replicate it for me? Even in bacteria, can you replicate it for me? A change of kind. I'm not talking about the bird's nose got half a centimetre longer. I'm talking about the bird turned into a fish, turned into a human, turned into a monkey, turned into... Give me a change of kind. Prove it to me. You know what they'll say? Say, we believe, I believe. In the future, this proof will come. You believe. You believe you can take your belief to Jahannam. That's your belief. I want dalil. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Bring me your proof. Don't bring me I believe. Don't bring me science will answer. I've seen this. I've seen documentaries on atheism with some of them, these, so-called genius atheists in a row, talking about, we have undisputable evidence. But ultimately, when you push them, it comes back to I believe. The evidence will come. One day, science will bring the evidence. One day, this will come. In the future, this will come. There'll be a day where this will come. One day, we will know the answer. We will find the missing link. One day. That's what they have. They only follow their own guesses. Nothing more than that. What we follow is ilm yaqeen, certainty from the Quran, from the revelation of Allah Azza wa Jal. If Allah Azza wa Jal wished, He could have created Adam however He wanted. But Allah Azza wa Jal told us, and we believe what Allah told us. Also, it's very important to link the belief in evolution with religious liberation. And there are several Darwinian evolutionists or evolutionary, biologists, who have written about this. That the purpose of the theory of revolution was to liberate mankind from religion. It was never ever about science. And I completely refuse to even consider evolution as science. It's not science, it's philosophy. It's philosophy and religion. It is there, quite simply, to replace religious thought and to completely erase religion and rules and regulations that come from religion from society. It's about liberalizing the society. It's about getting rid of religion. That's all it is. And it's the God of the atheists. Atheists have to have a God. How do they say we don't believe in God, so you had to have a God. So their God is Darwinian evolution. That's their God, the one that they worship. And they worship with fear and hope. SubhanAllah, they have hope, great hope in this God of theirs, that one day this God of theirs is going to give them the missing link. One day. One day. And we have ilm yaqeen in the Quran, certainty in the Quran, that Allah Azza wa Jal created Adam directly. He didn't create him from an ape. He didn't evolve him from bacteria or anything else. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal created Adam directly as he Jalla fi Ula told us, and as the Prophet ﷺ told us about. No problem using the Christian resources, but filter out any references to Christianity that might be problematic. I deal with this as an Aqidah issue. How then does the child answer the exam then? When they say that, comment on this. I would simply say, write factually. According to the theory of evolution, human beings evolved from ... According to Darwinian theory, ... Answer your question. Someone asked the question, where did human beings come from in your biology exam? So you simply write, according to Darwinian theory, whatever. That's it. Get your marks in your exam. You didn't lie. You didn't say anything wrong. All you did is quote what those people believe. Whereas in reality, we know the truth. That Allah Azza wa Jal created Adam directly. Jalla fi Ula. I also want to comment, just when I'm commenting on evolution, about how they lie and deceive people. It's absolutely unbelievable when you study how much, considering these are supposed to be factual people who believe in evidences and facts and, you know, scientific theory, wallahi, kadhabin, they lie and they lie and they lie. They lie so badly that it's just shocking how much they lie. You know, it's absolutely insane how much these people barefaced lie. I'm not talking about how they, you know, like slightly manipulate the data. They just lie, like outright lie. And there are so many examples of this, these fossils that are found and so on, and, you know, very clearly, you know, exposed later on that, yeah, you know, we lied. On top of that, if you want an even bigger lie, look at this image of evolution. This very famous image where you have this like ape, then it starts walking a bit taller, then it starts walking a bit taller, then it starts walking a bit taller, then it loses its hair, then it walks on 2 feet, then it turns into a white European guy. That progression right there is absolute rubbish. It didn't come from science. That was more likely to come from an artist who never even looked at the science. Nor does it even conform with what the science of evolution says, or even what Darwin said. It's literally just art. And it's there to make you kind of go, okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I can see that. It has no evidence for it. Has no evidence for it, not in the fossil record, not in anything. It has absolutely no evidence for it at all. It's just artwork. And so there is a lot of deception, a lot of lying, and I think that this should be discussed with the child. And the child should understand this and understand, because a person can be shocked to the core when someone says to them, you know, you guys don't believe in science? It's proven beyond all reasonable doubt that Darwinian evolution is correct. It's not proven beyond all reasonable doubt. It's not even proven, let alone proven beyond all reasonable doubt. It's not even half a proof. Rather, there's nothing except adhan, guessing, guesswork, and a lot of lying and deception. And inshallah, the more you study it, the more you will realize this, inshallah ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. What's the ruling on renting a property from a landlord, knowing that the landlord has a mortgage on the property or another property? It's not, doesn't make it forbidden, inshallah. It's their sin, what they use the money for, but it's permissible for you to rent a property. However, you can't be encouraging them. Like, for example, the landlord comes and says, look, you know, if you tell me you'll rent the property, I'll take a mortgage on the house. You say, yeah, I'll rent the property, you just go take the mortgage. Now, you can't tell them to take a mortgage on the house, but if they've done it, and you rent from them, there is no harm in this, inshallah. The harm is upon them, not upon you. And Allah knows best. How should we read English Islamic books? Is it something we read to learn new things, or do we take it seriously and make notes? I think we take it, each book, according to what it was written for. There are some books that were written just for general information at a very simple level. There are some books that are written more seriously. So the ones that are written at a higher level, you might need to make notes about them, for sure. Especially if you don't have access to Arabic to be able to read the original text. And Allah knows best. So this question is asking about someone who said that Allah humiliated the people of Syria because they stood against the ruler. To what extent do you agree or disagree about this statement, and why? First of all, I think that matters that relate to whole countries and large groups of people, and matters relating to people's lives and things like that, they are very, very serious matters indeed. And it's not right for people to make comments about them unless those comments have clear evidences for them in the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. As for the situation in Syria and around the Muslim world. We are certainly, we are pained when we see the suffering of Muslims around the world. And we understand that that suffering has a reason for it, and it has, and it's not something which is random. Allah Azza wa Jal decrees everything, and it has a reason for it. However, it's not right for us to draw conclusions like that and say that they stood against their ruler, so this is what happened. Rather, the situation was more complicated than that. Their ruler is, to what is apparent, is not a Muslim. It's a person who holds beliefs that are not compatible with the religion of Islam at all. That person is no way can be classed as a Muslim. But rebelling against a disbelieving ruler has also conditions for it, and rules for it, and regulations for it. It's not the case that every time you have a disbelieving ruler over you, that you are allowed to rebel against them, because it depends on what will be the outcome of that. And we've seen the outcome in these countries has not been praiseworthy. It's not been anything that anyone can be happy about. Nobody can look at the situation in Syria and say that this is something we're pleased with. Nobody is pleased with this. No Muslim can be pleased with what happened. It is something which is very, 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 subhanAllah, troubling and very upsetting to see the situation of the Muslims. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change the condition of the Muslims, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide the Muslims all around the world safety and security, and to be able to practice their religion. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the lives of the Muslims all over the world. So there is, I think that these kind of rash statements people make, you have to have an evidence for it. There's no doubt that rebelling against the ruler is a serious thing. And generally it's not allowed in Islam. It's not allowed in Islam, generally speaking. But when the ruler is a disbeliever, like the situation in Syria, the matter is difficult. And I think if we look at the situation with the benefit of hindsight, you don't see it to be praiseworthy. The situation that they had before was bad, but now it's worse, subhanAllah. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal for al-afu wal-afiyah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep them safe and to get them out of the situation that they're in. But I don't think that such comments like that are very helpful, and I don't think it tells the whole story. I think better than making these kind of comments is to explain to people the rulings regarding rebellion against the ruler, the rulings regarding rebellion against a disbelieving ruler, and the situation became what it became, and now it is what it is. At the end of the day, now the Muslims have to try to get the best out of a bad situation, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jal for His tawfiq. Can you please help clarify eating the food of Ahl Kitab? From what it seems is that the Jews are very strict with their meat and procedures. However, clarity is needed regarding the Christians. Yes, I do agree with that. I do agree that, first of all, the meat of Ahl Kitab is halal for us, no doubt about it. There's no doubt that their meat is permissible by the text of the Quran. And there's also no doubt that the rules of kosher meat are much clearer and stricter and easier to determine than the issue of the Christians. So I personally find eating kosher meat is very easy. You go to the shop or you go to a store or a restaurant and it says kosher, and you can eat it because you have confidence in the procedures that sort of led to that. With regard to the Christians and eating their meat, there are a number of masail ilmiya that you have to deal with, a number of issues that you have to discuss. Among the issues which need to be discussed are whether or not saying Bismillah is a requirement. And the scholars differ over this, because there are ayat which indicate that saying Bismillah is a must, and there are ayat which indicate that the food of the people of the book are permissible. So how do you reconcile one with the other? Do you say that the food of the people of the book is permissible whenever they say Bismillah? Or do you say that the food of the people of the book is an exception to the rule of saying Bismillah? In other words, the rule of saying Bismillah, and the exception to the rule is the food of the people of the book. So this is a matter about which the scholars differed. Personally, it's not the Bismillah that I'm so worried about. I'm more worried about the issue of Christianity today, in the sense that Christianity is dying out. Not everywhere in the world, but in countries like the UK, there is no doubt Christianity is dying out. The numbers are becoming less and less all the time. And atheism and agnosticism, and also people from other religions and cultures. In the UK today, in an abattoir, can you honestly say that you genuinely believe that it's extremely likely that the person working there is a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim? Can you really say that? It's probably, I don't think you can say, because I think the vast majority of people in this country are, at best, agnostic. Many are atheist. There's a lot of people working in abattoirs that are Hindu, Sikh, for example, of other religions. I find it very, very difficult to have confidence that in the UK today, the food that is slaughtered in a regular abattoir in the UK is slaughtered by a Christian. But if I knew it was slaughtered by a Christian, for me, I think that I don't think there's a clear evidence that Bismillah is a requirement for the food of the people of the book. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Then there are issues about stunning and slaughtering and all other kinds of things to come in there. So generally, personally, I stick to halal. If I can't find halal, kosher. But I would generally avoid, in this country, Christian meat. However, I would eat the meat of Christians in a country which is overwhelmingly Christian, like, for example, Spain or Brazil or something like that, where vast majority, you're going to either find Christian or perhaps, Muslim or Jew, but you're not going to find, sort of this huge number of atheists or agnostics or people of other religion like that. That's what it seems to me. I tend to sort of somewhat avoid the meat of the Christians in the UK at this moment in time, because it's not very clear that it's their meat, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. If someone breaks a fast, what needs to be done? What's the options? So, as I'm understanding this is someone who broke a fast without a valid reason. And I'm going to presume that they just broke it with food. The question needs to be a little bit more information, because there are different situations. But let's presume somebody deliberately broke a fast with food, not accidentally or didn't forget about it. The person needs to make up that day of fast, and they need to repent from it. That's what they have to do. As for the severe punishment, this is for the one who breaks the fast with intimacy, and who has intimate relations between husband and wife in the daytime in Ramadan. This is the one where there is 60 days of continuous fasting and so on. Otherwise, the person has to make up the day of fasting, and they have to repent to Allah Azza wa Jalla. So it's a very good question about issues relating to COVID and social distancing. Virtual khutbahs, virtual imam, praying in social distance, praying Taraweeh in Jama'ah but not praying the Fard prayer in the Jama'ah, and so on. So I'm just going to comment briefly, and I'm going to conclude my Q&A with this particular question, inshallah. So first of all, we need to understand that an actual imam has to be physically present. So you can't pray Jumu'ah behind an imam who is not with you, and you're in your house and the imam is somewhere else. But the imam might choose to give a khutbah every week for the purpose of reminding people. It's not a Jumu'ah khutbah, or it's Jumu'ah for the imam, maybe the Imam has 4 people, 3 people, 2 people there. So it's a Jum'ah for the Imam, but it's not a Jum'ah for you. But you listen to the khutbah out of, to learn and to gain information. You can't pray behind an Imam who is not present. So you're in your house and the Imam is in the masjid and you're praying behind the Imam. You can't do this. Praying with social distancing you can do. It doesn't invalidate the salah, and even though it's not the sunnah, if that's the only way that you can open the masjid, then there is no harm, inshallah, if you have to pray with a gap between the people. It doesn't invalidate the salah. It's against the sunnah, but it doesn't invalidate the salah. And if it has to be done, if it's a choice between closing the masjid or praying with a gap, pray with a gap. And what about praying Taraweeh and Eid in Jama'ah but not other fard? I'm not sure who's doing this. I haven't heard of any cases like this where people are praying Eid Salah in Jama'ah but not praying the fard Salah in the Jama'ah. I'm not sure of any cases like that, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So a question about lineage. Is lineage from the father or from the mother? No, lineage is from the father. Lineage is always from the father, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. And I'm just dealing with it just to get the question up to an even number so I don't forget where I am. What is said about female circumcision in Islam? So yes, Islam does have female circumcision. However, at the moment, the problem in the world is that you have another action which is totally different to what Islam has, called FGM, female genital mutilation. And this has nothing to do with Islam. However, because many countries don't distinguish between female circumcision, which Islam prescribes, which is beneficial and not harmful to the girl at all, and FGM. And because of that, really there's no real option for Muslims to do this in this day and age, because they are at risk of losing their children because they are accused of FGM when what they did is not FGM. It's something that is prescribed in Islam. It's not medically dangerous. It's not bad for the girl's health, and it's something which is only good, because Islam only brings good. And there is a clear evidence for this, for example, in the hadith of Aisha, وَمَسَّ الْخِتَانِ الْخِتَانِ وَجَبَ الْغُسْلِ أو كما قالت, or كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. She said about the Prophet that he said, when the 2 circumcised parts touch, ghusl becomes obligatory. So there is no doubt about this, but we can't do it at the moment, because if we do it, we run the risk that we are lumped under this legislation for FGM, which is a terrible thing and should never be mixed with what Islam says, and there is no way to distinguish between the two. There is no distinguishing between the two. And a person might say, well, it's allowed in my country, but the problem is you travel to another country and they take your children off you. So I would suggest that because it's a sunnah, it's not obligatory, like it is for a man, then I would suggest for a woman it should be left at the moment, because of the concern that most of the countries don't distinguish between what Islam allows and this terrible practice of FGM, which has nothing to do with Islam at all. So this is something that should be avoided for the time being, and it's a sunnah, so if it's avoided there is no harm in that, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. I'm going to stop there, inshallah ta'ala. I still have around about 90 questions left, so inshallah ta'ala I'm just going to see next week. I think next week it's still, the masjid will not have opened, or maybe perhaps it might be that the masjid is open by next week. If the masjid is open by next week, I'm not sure exactly what the plan is with Q&A. I definitely won't do it at home, inshallah, if the masjid is open, but I'm not sure if we're going to keep doing it in the masjid or what we're going to do. Maybe I would just continue it at home just to finish the questions and stop, I'm not sure. I will talk to the administration of the masjid and ask them what's the best thing to do, inshallah. That's what Allah made easy for me to mention, and Allah knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.